What is going on, everybody? You are back on another edition of the Coach's Corner. I am joined, as always, by my guy, Caleb James. And today we have a very special guest. I wore my purple shirt, Mr. Purple Insider, Matthew Coller. How's it going, brother? How's Minnesota treating you?
I mean, it's been hectic is how it's been treating me. I would not have expected the type of Kirk Cousins press conferences that I've been to so far. I would not have thought that the head coach would call out his quarterback for not being vaccinated, or that the quarterback would blame the room size where they met for him having to sit out. But we're back on track maybe for a few days. So I'm doing okay. I'm sunburned, as you can maybe see on our video. But other than that, I'm doing all right.
Yeah, you do. How is the sun down in Minnesota right now? I know it's kind of hot as hell everywhere, but
yeah, and maybe people don't know that about Minnesota is that in the summertime it gets super hot. I mean, we're talking like in the 90s a lot of times, and there's no cover for us. They don't. And maybe this is intentional from Mike Zimmer. I don't know. He's not always our biggest fan, but there's no like stand under this nice shady tree or something. Like we're kind of right out there. So I try to wear a hat. But as you can sort of tell, some days, I forget the hat or it's just too much. So I've got my fresh tan, I guess, going into the fall.
Yes, you do. You're looking good going into the fall. That's how you got to do it. Obviously, we got you here because we're going to talk a little bit of NFC. We're always talking AFC on this show, being Kansas City Chiefs show. So we need to get an NFC perspective, and we're going to start right with your division over there in Minnesota, because it's been. Besides Kirk Cousins talking about he's going around in a plexiglass room doing God knows what, you've also had the Aaron Rodgers saga. You got the Justin Fields, Andy Dalton going on there. I mean, it's been a wild division in this offseason so far. And just right away, what are you thinking, Minnesota? A lot of changes, a lot of new personnel coming in. Little bit of a down year for them as they've had some good seasons in the past. Where's the thought process right now for the team?
Yeah, and Aaron Rodgers coming back sort of changes all of this when it comes to the expectations, as you guys might expect. But this team did a lot in the offseason. They basically tried to rebuild their entire defense through free agency, and they signed Patrick Peterson and Brashad Breeland, who you guys are very familiar with, Xavier Woods. I mean, they went out of their way to revamp the defensive line with Delvin Tomlinson. Michael Pierce is coming back. He was signed 2 years ago. And even bringing back Stephen Weatherly, who was with the Vikings before and was drafted by the Vikings. And so you're going to have probably 7 new starters on the defense overall. Because they wanted to turn things around quickly. They know that they've got a ton of talent on the offensive side with an emerging Justin Jefferson. Adam Thielen is a Pro Bowler. Dalvin Cook is one of the best running backs in the league. And they have an offensive line that is entirely made up of first and second round draft picks. And they were projecting a third rounder, but now we're not really sure who's going to start at right guard. So they looked at it as we can have a good offense again, revamp the defense for Mike Zimmer, make a few changes, and potentially be a legitimate contender, which I think if you look at it as from the rosy view of everything goes right for a football team, if it does for this team, they can be very good and they can compete for the division because they have that much talent. But we're already only a couple weeks, 2 weeks into training camp. We've got the first round draft pick left tackle has not practiced yet in 11 on 11s, Christian Darrisaw. We've got, like I said, the coach and the quarterback are butting heads over vaccination status. And it's already an issue with Kirk Cousins and leadership and is he the guy who could take your franchise anywhere? And Justin Jefferson in the offseason said that Joe Burrow had more swagger when he played with Joe Burrow. And so you've already had a lot of things that are sort of intangible that are going on that you don't just say, oh, let me look at the roster and see how strong they are, but a lot of other dynamics at play that make you wonder if they can maximize the talent that they have. So if we're picking divisions, I mean, I don't have them as competing with the Green Bay Packers as long as Aaron Rodgers is there. And whether they can be ahead of the Bears and even the Lions is how do you fix what's been broken here early in this training camp and maximize the talent that you have?
Yeah, and that leaves me with the question, is Mike Zimmer a guy that is potentially on the hot seat? I mean, his bread and butter has been defense. They struggled last year. You talked about all the changes that they made coming in this year. There's tension between him and the starting quarterback right now. Where is his status going into this year? If they don't win early and win often, I mean, where does that leave him at the end of the year?
Yeah, I think that this year feels like sort of the final countdown for a lot of people here. I mean, you have Mike Zimmer, who's been here a long time. The team has often been somewhere around 500 with one pop-up year in 2017, which he had the number one defense and they were fantastic, went to the NFC Championship. But aside from that 1 year, it's been 11-5, it's been 10-6, 2-7-9 seasons, 1-8-8 season, 1-8-7-1 season. Like all those sound like a very middling team. And I think at some point you go, how can we get past this? Now, the issue with Kirk Cousins actually might play in Mike Zimmer's favor, because if this year Kirk Cousins is the reason you weren't good and the defense is good and the weapons do what they are expected to do, Dalvin Cook is good, but it's Cousins. And last year that was kind of, I mean, to some extent the case, even though the defense fell apart at the end, but Cousins got them to 1-5 and led the league in interceptions at that point. So if that happens again, you could see Zimmer sort of getting another chance to say, well, look, we pinned you with a quarterback that just wasn't what we expected him to be when we signed him. And that's not on you. But I don't know if there's going to be that much leeway, because some of it is on him. Like, he's the one that decides on the offensive philosophy. He's the one that's butting heads with Kirk Cousins and that could never sort of figure out how to form a relationship with Cousins as the head coach and quarterback. And so I think that this year really will determine Mike Zimmer's future. If they're great and they overcome some of this stuff early in camp, it will say a lot about him. And they've done that before, so I'm not counting that out. I think he has the capability to do it. But if they fall apart and they go 6-11 or something after having high expectations, then I think that we might see a change.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question real quick, Matt. Obviously you've been covering the Vikings for a long time up there. Do you think the team was missing Kevin Stefanski last year? Because I think that his role in some of the offense that they had, going forward on those teams was like, a little bit underrated until people saw how good of a coach he was this year in Cleveland, where he's able to take a lot of the same run scheme plays, like a lot of the run action, play action type passes, and really develop that because he had a very strong running game in Cleveland. Do you think they were missing that presence last year? Because I think that he's a great offensive football coach. He's got a great mind for what he's doing. And I mean, Kirk Cousins had a pretty good season back in 2019. How much of that do you think was like Kevin Stefanski being able to figure out if, when's the right time to get the ball to Dalvin Cook and when's the right time to play action?
Yeah, no, I do to some extent. I also think that it really hurt them to start the season with Justin Jefferson not fully ready to go because of COVID. I think it hurt them not to have fans in US Bank Stadium. Like, those things sort of play into it. But there was just this layer of creativity that Stefanski had that I think Kubiak was running a little bit more of an older Kubiak offense. And the reason that I think that is just because I saw linebackers start to kind of get it with a lot of the crossing routes and things like that. There was less pre-snap motion until maybe midway through the season, when I think they probably said, hey, Gary, maybe you need to throw in some pre-snap motion. This isn't 1998. And so there was a little bit of like, Gary's got to ramp it back up because he hadn't been a play caller in quite a while. And then once they got on track, their offense was very good for long stretches. But there's also a part of me that just thinks when it comes to, they've had 3 different offensive coordinators here, and it's going to be 4 in all 4 years with Cousins. John DeFilippo got fired, and then, Kevin Stefanski, he gets promoted. Gary Kubiak retires. But a lot of them have just had kind of the same results, where at the end of the year, statistically, you go, wow, he threw for 4,000 yards, or they average whatever yards per play. And yet they didn't produce the amount of points that they were capable of. There were no shows against good defenses. There were key interceptions at the worst time. There were final drives that didn't get completed when there were opportunities. And it's sort of like, when you try a bunch of pretty good people at this and you get the same result, maybe it's the quarterback. And that's kind of how I've come to look at it, that I do think that losing Kevin Stefanski was a factor for them getting off to a little bit of a slow start, but I also think it's very, very Kirk Cousins to have a really slow start and go 1-6, and then get hot and win a bunch of games in a row, and then something goes wrong, and so even if he plays well, you can't quite get over the hump because it wasn't perfect circumstances. Like, all of this sounds like I'm describing to you sort of Kirk Cousins' career every season in a nutshell. And so I think a lot of Kevin Stefanski, people in the organization think a lot of Kevin Stefanski. A couple of years ago, there were a lot of people in the Vikings organization that wanted Kevin Stefanski to be the head coach and to move on from Zimmer. That was a pretty popular opinion when I was talking to people at the NFL Combine, the last Combine that we had. And so, yes, I do think that's a long-winded way of just saying yes, but kind of no. You know what I mean? Because I think at the end of the year, Gary was probably happy with a lot of things they did on offense, but you still sort of had that, hey, it's a final drive, Kirk. If you just go score against the Bears, you go to the playoffs and you can't get it done. And it's kind of like what has defined his career.
Yeah, and this league now is such a quarterback-driven league that you got to have the guy, or you really have no shot. You might make the playoffs, but you'll never win a championship. And in that division now, you got a couple new faces at quarterback in Justin Fields and in Jared Goff. And obviously old Aaron Rodgers is back, which was kind of up in the air for a while. But I want to go over to Chicago first to talk to you about Justin Fields and Andy Dalton. Basically, just what do you expect to see Fields? Because to me, he's got to be the guy right away.
I think so too. Yeah. And if you're doing the Andy Dalton thing, you're sort of doing the Mike Glennon thing, which was throw him out there for a few weeks, wait till he struggles, and then put in Mitch Trubisky. And I don't think that helped anybody. I know that Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes both sat for a year, but there's also a ton of examples of rookies who have played right away and who have either had success right away, like Justin Herbert and Baker Mayfield, or even if they took their lumps, they eventually had success down the road. And for the type of athleticism that the quarterback has, I think matters in the equation for if you're starting them right away, because even if the guy isn't perfect mentally, and even Mahomes has said, yeah, I've come a long way since my first year. And then you look at the stats and go, wow, like, you were doing it without even being perfect, because he has the athleticism and the arm talent to work around some of those shortcomings. And I think that throwing a rookie like him who played at Ohio State, who has the physical tools that he has, into the deep end of the pool isn't a bad idea in their circumstances. And I also think they can win games with him because they have enough talent. The only thing I would be worried about is their offensive line looks really bad. And if you're talking about a rookie with a bad offensive line, I don't like that combination very much. I don't think it helped Tua very much last year to play with a bad offensive line. Even go back to Josh Rosen, where he had to play with a bad offensive line. Like, it doesn't ruin every quarterback, but it makes life a lot more difficult than if you have time to build them up. And then you've got a Baker Mayfield by his third year. We've got the best offensive line in the league. I think that's a difference maker. He's going to have guys who could get open, but Andy Dalton probably can handle immediate pressure a little better by just getting rid of the ball quickly because he can process. That would be my only holdup. But I think that they still should have expectations to win, in which case, play your best play.
Yeah, it's tough to make plays from your backside as a quarterback. And, immediately you think of like a David Carter situation, who he's one of the quarterbacks kind of ruined, right? Like, he got in, had a terrible offensive line, got sacked consistently, got hit all the time, and he never really recovered from it as a top pick. So, but I still think, and I think you make a good point to that, is the athleticism part of it, right? Sometimes it might just be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, so I'm just going to take off and run and pick up, 4 yards and keep us moving, at least not take a sack or whatever. So, and I don't think that's the worst thing. Whereas if you got guys back there that are statues, they're going to end up getting crushed and taking more hits and making bad plays into worse plays. Then things compile and it really gets worse. Let me ask you about the things in Detroit now. We got Dan Campbell over there biting kneecaps. Jared Goff no longer has his pacifier and Sean McVay. What are your expectations for this Lions football team? Because I don't see them really competing too much in the division or the conference or really at all.
Yeah, I think saying they won't compete at all is probably right. But I'll just say one thing. I love Dan Campbell because he seems like he's a lot of fun. And when you're coming off the most miserable coach in the entire world to a guy who's got some enthusiasm for the job and is like, let's go get him, boys. it sort of reminds me of like Rex Ryan a little bit. Let's go eat a snack. Remember that from Rex Ryan on Hard Knocks? I feel like Dan Campbell would be the guy that says, let's go eat a snack. And that doesn't always last forever, but my guess is that it's getting pretty good reviews from players that are just so exhausted who have been there of what they had for Matt Patricia. And my experience covering Vikings Lions over the last couple of years, the Vikings went 6-0 against Patricia, and it was the worst opposing coaching job I think I've ever seen. I mean, when it comes to a division opponent that I got to see a number of times, like I've seen individual games. Adam Gase in Miami versus the Vikings was incredibly bad. But when you're talking about like the other team isn't fooled at all by your coverages, everyone is comfortable with what they're doing against you. Kirk Cousins' quarterback rating, I think in those 6 games is something like 125. I mean, he didn't get pressured. He didn't get confused. He was finding guys wide open. Like for a defensive genius who is supposedly a rocket scientist, his defenses were the most simplistic I've ever watched on tape the Vikings play. So if Aaron Glenn comes in and makes it even slightly difficult for opposing quarterbacks, they could actually be better. And, you know, I know that Jared Goff doesn't get a whole ton of respect. And I get that because his team just moved on from him. But Matt Stafford was injured a lot. He was playing injured a lot. He took a lot of sacks from the games that I watched him. It's like, and Jared Goff has his offensive line back. I think the Lions have a good offensive line. I am not talking you into the Lions being good. I'm only saying, could they be competitive though, when everyone thinks they're just going to be complete trash? Like, I think we're talking about maybe a Miami situation with Brian Flores. Like the players want to play for the team. The quarterback is going to grind it out. And I don't think they're just going to be giving away easy wins like Matt Patricia's team was.
When you look at Detroit, they're laying the foundation. The foundation is set there. They could have taken a pick, you know, they drafted Penei Sewell. They could have just Detroited that up and completely blown it and not taken him. And Dan Campbell said, well, this guy's the best offensive lineman in the draft, so we're just going to take him and we're just going to get nasty and mean up front. This isn't going to be their year by any stretch of the imagination, just because I don't know what their deal is for quarterback long-term. I don't think Jared Goff's going to be there long-term. But if you kind of look at how they're building their team and kind of some of the moves they made this offseason, they're laying the foundation. And, you know, Dan Campbell, I know a lot of people don't like him. He's too animated or whatever. If you're a player, you're going to enjoy that kind of stuff a lot, especially like you said, you know, they're playing under that fake Patriot way that can never be recreated unless you have Belichick or Brady together. So there's that for the Lions. But, yeah, you're right. They're not going to compete this year. I think they'll probably be like a 6 or 7 win football team this year. But the foundation is there. They have actually got a really good start at that. This might be one of the better spots they've found themselves in a long time.
And I think that when they go into next year's draft, I'm not sure that they'll be as bad as drafting Spencer Rattler for sure, but they'll be in a position where so many spots are like filled by higher draft picks or players that they've signed and so forth, that they'll be able to trade up and spend draft capital to get that quarterback to build on for the future, where they've got a lot of high draft picks and they've got the foundation set, sort of like Cleveland was when they brought in Baker Mayfield. Remember, Cleveland passed on Carson Wentz and a couple of other quarterbacks and waited until they had a better foundation. And I think Detroit's doing the same thing. And if Dan Campbell is just not even good at this, that's okay. Because at least you don't have the worst person who is coaching your team. At least you have somebody who's going to say, let's go fight, guys. And you can sort of keep everybody on the same page. You know what I mean? Much less, even if you're sort of struggling, and then, you know, you can go forward from there. So it's sort of funny because right now it's like the Packers and the Vikings, and it's been the Packers and the Vikings, you know, and the Bears with Trubisky sort of not being a real contender, but popping up in there into the playoffs. But you look down the road like 2 years from now, and it could be Chicago and Detroit. Very realistically, those teams I think are set up a little better for the future than the Vikings and Packers.
Yeah, and speaking about the Packers, you know, you have the Aaron Rodgers situation, and by all means, it sounds like he's gone after this year. And one of the articles I wrote for a site was I could see him ended up in Las Vegas in 2022. You know, John Gruden has kind of wanted to get rid of Derek Carr forever. He's had success with older quarterbacks. Rodgers would be closer to LA, where his soon-to-be wife is going to be a lot of the times because she's an actress. Where do you think Rodgers lands? And then after that, we'll talk about maybe who you think is going to win this division.
Yeah, I still think that number one on the list is probably Denver, because I was just watching the Vikings and Denver Broncos have a joint practice today. And you know what I was saying? Man, they got some good players, but they have no quarterbacks. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is as appreciated by me as anybody else for what he's come back from. But it's not like you watch him and go, wow, that's a Super Bowl quarterback today. And Drew Lock is all over the place, as he was last year, and as I think he'll always be. I'm sure that there are some Drew Lock defenders still out there, but I just don't see it. And, guys can always take huge steps forward, but if you're banking on that, then like, what are we talking about? That just goes far against the odds. Yeah. So if he doesn't have a Josh Allen thing where he just takes this massive leap forward, and he's got all the weapons to do it, then they're going to have Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant and Jerry Jeudy, who I watched these guys today and were like, wow, I mean, they've got some players. KJ Hamler was making plays out there. Like, they got guys and they could add to their offensive line. But I mean, if I'm Rodgers, I'm looking at those weapons and going, yes, that is what I need. I don't need just one of these guys. I need like 4 of these guys to throw to that Green Bay never really gave me. And then a Vic Fangio defense. If I'm Rodgers, I know how good Vic Fangio's defenses are. I would want that. And if I'm Rodgers too, and if he has a great year this year, I'm like, bring on Mahomes. Let's go. Let me play in the hardest division. The Raiders, the only thing about the Raiders, and I'm sure Gruden would try like crazy, but my only thing is, like, where is that roster? They've just drafted so badly in recent years. If you're doing your Tom Brady analysis and going, which one of these teams that needs a quarterback has a great roster? Well, it's no coincidence that Tampa Bay drafted great in the previous years leading up to when he decided to join them. And that would be the thing that might scare Rodgers away, even though for a lot of other reasons it would be a fit.
No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. So with this division, are you thinking Packers, kind of like everybody else, comes out of it? Caleb, what about you? Packers?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Green Bay. This is Rodgers' last season there. I think he's going to come out with scorched earth. I think he wants to try to win a Super Bowl as best as he can there, because, it's not really between him and his teammates. It's not between him and his coaches. It's not between him and, the fans. It's between him and that front office. So what a better way to spite them than to do like, what Michael Jordan did, go out there and win a championship your last season and then come up and then leave, pack up and leave. The big thing with that division, though, is I think the Packers are they're so far superiorly talented to a lot of the other teams. Just, when they do have that Rodgers connection with Devontae Smith down the field, I'm going to go Packers. My number 2 choice, I'm going to go with the Bears. And then I will probably go with the Vikings and the Lions in that order too. That'll be my division order for the NFC North.
Matt, what about you?
I think I would have the Vikings second, but with the capability of that easily going either way. And it's just how good is Justin Fields is going to be what answers that. And the interesting part about those two teams is that they play each other, I believe, in week 15 and week 18. So right at the end of the season, when Justin Fields, we're going to have a good idea whether he can really play or not. If he's not in by that point, then there's maybe a problem there. But if he's in early, like week 1 or whatever, and then he's got that whole season, 14 weeks to be ready for the Vikings and Mike Zimmer's defense, then you're going to see a guy who's really not a rookie anymore at that point. And that changes the equation a little bit. So that could determine it. I mean, if Chicago wins both or the Vikings win both, I think it's very close between those two teams. I just give the slight edge to the Vikings, even despite the way things have started out here in camp.
I'm with you. I'll take the Vikings second as well, going to round that off. But let's move on to the NFC East real quick. We'll touch on this division just quickly. What a wild division. Last year, it didn't seem like anybody wanted to win it. And then out of nowhere, the Washington football team kind of takes it down. This year, like every year, there's a ton of hype for the Cowboys. I loved Dak last year in that offense. I hope that he gets healthy and is ready to go this year, because it's a fun offense to watch when he's healthy. They have a ton of pieces. But I think that Washington might be the best team in the division again. Their defense is incredible. They have great skill players, and we're going to talk about a guy that you know well, Matt, from your days in Buffalo, Mr. Ryan Fitzmagic. And tell me about this Washington team. Am I crazy to think that they're the ones that are going to win it again?
I don't think you're crazy. I would only say I have seen this movie before with Ryan Fitzpatrick a couple of times.
Yes, I do. I do know where you're going with this. I hear that.
It's look at all these weapons we have. Look at this defense we have. Ryan Fitzpatrick, all he needs to do is keep the train on the tracks, and this Bills team will go wherever. And even they would have said that with the Jets or when he was with the Texans. And every time he's gotten a chance to play with a team that actually has a lot of talent, it's sort of the same result every time. Is he'll get you some wins, but he'll also throw away a lot of games too. And Tampa Bay gave him a chance to start when Jameis got suspended, and it was the same deal. He put up crazy stats to start the season. He was super hot, and then it kind of fell apart. It's hard for me to think that a guy who's like 38 years old is going to change his stripes. He's always going to be Fitzmagic, and there will be incredible games where we go, can you believe he threw for 480 yards? But then there will be other games where you say, can you believe he threw for 6 picks? And like, that's Ryan Fitzpatrick. And, you know, if you get the right side of the variance, yeah, there's a possibility. To me, I'm just not convinced until I see it. They really do have great weapons and a great defense, but I tend to lean toward the Cowboys of winning this division because I'm just nervous about having seen this whole Ryan Fitzpatrick thing play out before. But if you go roster for roster, non-quarterback throughout the league, I think Washington's one of the strongest.
That's kind of where I am with you. And then I'm just banking on my guy Fitzy here, who is one of the most electrifying dudes in the NFL to watch. It just, you don't know. Every time he touches the ball, it's either going to be a 60-yard bomb for a touchdown or a pick six. So how much more fun can you have with that?
Ron Rivera, real quick, I'd say Ron Rivera's done a fantastic job rebuilding that entire organization.
Yeah.
They were literally in shambles, about as low as you can go. Dan Snyder is just a huge stain on the NFL at this point. They need to find a way to make him sell that team. But you get a guy with as much character as Ron Rivera has, he's going to produce results on the field. That's why I think they're going to win the division this year, because I can say the same story with the Cowboys. How many times do we hear the Cowboys are going to come out and do awesome, and it's just the Hard Knocks hype crowd coming out to say it? I get it that they have talent, but based on what we saw last year, I would have to go ahead and give the edge to Washington on this one, just because I've seen them do it before, and Dallas still has way too many questions on their defense for me right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, you know, Mike McCarthy, what we saw from him, a bad hire on the defensive side, and Mike Nolan that immediately blew up in their face. And they bring in Dan Quinn, who hasn't had a good defense in a while with the Atlanta Falcons. And so I'm supposed to be convinced that that's going to change. My only thing is, it comes down to the quarterback, though. I mean, I think Dak Prescott is, if he's not top 7, and he's somewhere at least probably fringe top 10. It really depends on how you feel about him, but the weapons that he has are so good. It seems like this team could be one of the best offenses in the entire league. And I thought a couple of years ago when they showed that, Jason Garrett sort of undid them with some bad, like timely decisions. They lost some close games, but even when they didn't have a great defense, they were still getting so much out of Dak that he was able to carry them. It's still a super flawed division. I mean, it's like you're facing one proven quarterback in the entire division. So I'm going to lean toward him because of that, even though I think that the criticisms for Dallas are right and the praise for Ron Rivera and the praise for Washington is right. But the difference between Dak and Fitzpatrick, I think, is pretty significant.
And that's definitely a fair argument. I do think that it will be coming down to the Cowboys or Washington. I don't think the Eagles are quite there yet. You kind of don't know what their situation is with Jalen Hurts. There's still the rumors out there that they might want to trade for Deshaun Watson, and that whole situation is who knows what at this point. And then to me, the Giants feel like the team that could just literally implode within the first 3 to 4 weeks. To me, I feel like last night we were doing a show. I was doing a show for another thing, and we put the over/under at 6.5 weeks for him to get fired. Like, it seems like 4 guys have retired from that team in a couple of weeks of practice. Like, that's unbelievable to me. So I'm going to go Washington, but I'll say Washington. Dallas is right there. It sounds like, Caleb, you're with me on Washington. Matt, you got the Cowboys.
I do have the Cowboys. Yeah. And just to comment quickly on the Giants, I mean, the roster I think is pretty good. And I think their defense could be good and their weapons could be good. And it's always amazing to me that when you see a franchise have certain coaches that are sort of right there that they could hire, and they go, no, we're so smart, we're going to go get the special teams coach from New England. You're like, I don't get it, man, but okay. If you're going to do that, the guy must be really impressive, right? And instead you have veterans retiring and you have him making people run laps and stuff. Like, one of the benefits that I've had of covering Mike Zimmer is I've gotten to see up very close a professional, functional head coach of a football team and how he acts. And so if I see coaches acting way outside the lines of how Mike Zimmer handles himself, then I think, I don't think this is going to work. When you got guys running laps because they do something wrong, just think, gosh, like, you can't treat these guys like it's high school. You just can't. Yeah. And that seems to be how a lot of these coaches who have never had the experience before want to do it. And so that's why when we make fun of Dan Campbell, I'm like, hey, let's keep in mind though, Dan Campbell was a player. He's going to treat the players like the professionals. Joe Judge doesn't seem like he's doing that. And now guys are walking away from his team. So I don't trust that. And I don't really trust Daniel Jones. I mean, he's a turnover machine that makes Ryan Fitzpatrick blush.
Yeah, that is
New York had a chance to get Eric Bieniemy paired up with Saquon Barkley to be his head coach. I mean, I don't know how much interest there was into that, but that's something interesting. When is New England going to be done fooling teams into thinking they can recreate what they have? Because it's never going to happen at this point. Belichick's produced one coach that can maybe do something, and that is Brian Flores down in Miami, who's actually building a decent roster, putting things together. But yeah, the Giants are a complete mess right now up there.
Yeah, I think about that all the time. And I remember I was listening to Joe Thomas's podcast when he first started. I don't know if he still does the podcast, but he started one right after he retired with Andrew Hawkins. And he was talking about Eric Mangini, who is a Belichick guy. Yeah. And he was saying that Mangini would put all of these like sayings around the building, like these just football cliches. And then he would call on a player in a meeting and demand that they spout back to him the cliche on the wall. And Joe Thomas was like, I need to block DeMarcus Ware, dude. Like, what are you doing to me? Why are you committing some sort of bizarro psychological warfare? And then you read the story from Kaylin Kaler of The Defector, where she was writing about Matt Patricia, and Patricia is showing, highlights of Cam Newton dancing and trying to piss off his players, saying like, oh, look, go get that guy or whatever. And his players are like, what? We love guys who dance after touchdowns. Like, what are you guys talking about? His dances are awesome. It's just like, maybe there's a connection with Belichick's kind of introverted type of guy, that he hires a certain type of person who's like an all football, all X's and O's. And Belichick is so good at it, and Tom Brady, that they're able to win with that. But that style anywhere else, it just rings hollow. And if you have the rings, then players say, okay, well, hey, you're the man, let's do it. If you don't have the rings, or you're a special teams coach for the Patriots, you're like, you're not Belichick. Why are you treating me this way? I don't get it. I think like not treating them like grown men. There's a crazy value to doing the most like common sense thing.
And that can be like, if you look on Twitter and like all these stories come out of Joe Judge, like all the former players go like, dude, these are grown men making millions of dollars. Like, they're just not going to do that, like flat out. Like, you're crazy if you think they're going to. And that's why I'm saying, like, before or not, Judge is going to be gone. He's going to be fired. It's just a matter of time in my eyes. Let's talk about the NFC West, which is one of the most interesting divisions in football to me. You got three teams there that their over/under totals in Vegas are over 10 games, and then the fourth one is at 8.5. So it's like wide open. The 49ers, the Seahawks, the Rams, Arizona. You got Matt Stafford now in LA teaming up with McVay, who seems like he's completely in love. He's a 16-year-old boy that has just found his sweetheart. Trey Lance in the 49ers. You got Trent Williams calling him a generational talent. And you got Arizona. Is Kyler Murray going to take the next step? And Cliff Kingsbury, are they going to start winning some games? And then you got old trusty Rusty over there in Seattle, And we talked about this the other night on my show. And when I look at it, if I'm a betting guy, Seattle had the third best odds. So I said, maybe give me that. But man, there's something about the 49ers roster. If Trey Lance is what he is, man, the Niners could be a very, very dangerous football team. Matt, where do you see them going, first of all, with the quarterback position, Lance or Garoppolo? Because to me, you have such a weak schedule at the beginning of the year. They're starting with like Detroit and Philly and these teams. You don't want Jimmy Garoppolo to go in there and go 4-0, and then what do? Put Lance out there against teams that might not be as strong. Let him get his feet underneath him. You made the great talk about how athleticism in quarterbacks helps these young guys. Trey Lance, if you haven't watched him in college and make some plays, that dude is an athletic dude. But talk to me about this quarterback situation.
Well, the hard part is Jimmy Garoppolo has taken you to a Super Bowl with a great roster. And that actually makes it more difficult because if you go with Lance, have we ever seen a rookie quarterback lead the team to a Super Bowl? I'm not sure we ever have. And even the best rookie quarterback last year, Justin Herbert, who lit the world on fire, what did they go, 7-9? I mean, that's kind of what you expect from a rookie quarterback most of the time, even if they have a really good roster, is that you're just going to have your peaks and valleys based on the guy learning to play in the NFL. And it's hard to put expectations to win right away. Garoppolo, they have done a lot of winning. And this is the people, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, Nick Mullins averaged 8 yards a pass. Anybody can do it. When Nick Mullins played, they went something like 6-19. So I'm not sure I've ever actually bought that. They win a lot with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just, you could end up with like an Alex Smith to Colin Kaepernick type of thing where Garoppolo plays, but eventually they just say it's not going to be good enough to get us over the hump. Think about even the 2017 Chiefs. If at some point during that season, while Alex Smith was playing great, leading the league in quarterback rating, if they had said, we think Mahomes is ready, we're just going to go to him, maybe they go to the Super Bowl instead of being beaten by the Titans, right? It's just that it takes guts to do something like that. So I think you're probably better off just starting with Trey Lance, but there's also that 50-50 shot that he's not ready because he's only played one football game since 2019. I think it's an extremely hard thing to figure that you almost have to start the safe route with Jimmy Garoppolo, and sort of the moment that things look a little dicey with Garoppolo, then you're like, oh, what a shame we have to go to Trey Lance.
What really helped young quarterbacks though? Tremendous offensive line play and good, solid receivers that can catch the ball. Man, the 49ers are so solid across the board. Even their defense, great defense. Apparently, Nick Bosa, the words, he's been pairing it up out there in their camp. But man, you got Trent Williams protecting your blind side. You can throw the ball to George Kittle. You can throw it to Deebo Samuel. Kyle Shanahan, very creative in his run calls. Man, that just, to me, it seems like they moved up because, John Lynch probably knew deep down the reason they did lose that Super Bowl to the Chiefs was just because their quarterback got outplayed down the line. So it will be interesting. They gave up a lot to go up there. So, but I've been kind of reading and hearing, they've been saying a lot of the veterans on the roster are for Trey Lance. A lot of those guys probably at this point, they know what they have in Garoppolo. They're going to win. If everyone stays healthy, they're going to win 10 to 12 football games. They're going to win that division. And they're probably going to make a deep run in the playoffs. But is it going to be enough to get them over that hurdle? And then you see some of these throws Trey Lance is making in practice. And I will say it does remind me of a little bit of the hype that here in Kansas City we'd started to hear around Patrick Mahomes when he had started to tear it up in his first couple of training camps.
Yeah, I want to see it. I want to see him play in preseason. I think that he could be one of the most fun players to watch. Not like Ryan Fitzpatrick that could be an interception or touchdown, but like actual good quarterback play.
Well, and they drafted him that high, according to Kyle Shanahan, because of his mental capacity, right? Like that was the big part of the conversation. And the proof is in the pudding for how much they gave away to get Trey Lance. Like you traded everything. So clearly, like, I believe you when you say that you, looked at his mental capacity and said he could handle this. So look, there's no future for Jimmy Garoppolo there. Why not? Right. That would be the way I look at it. It's just, if Lance sputters off the beginning of the season and then all the guys, like with Tua last year, they start to look around and go, wait, we had a veteran quarterback and we were winning, and now we're not winning because of this young guy that you want in here that you guys are forcing because you drafted high, then it gets into really tricky territory. It's almost better to let the veteran sort of fall apart. So the entire team says, okay, all right, fine, we've got to go to Trey Lance.
And I think that's a very good point that you brought up there with the Dolphins and Tua. It's almost seems like a mirrored situation there. Um, Russell Wilson in this division, they finally started to give him a little bit of help along the offensive line. They bring in Dwayne Brown, who is an upgrade from, almost any offensive lineman that they've had in Seattle. The one thing that makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit is when I see Pete Carroll saying that they want to run the football more. It goes against everything that makes sense in today's football, especially when you have a Russell Wilson. Do you think that's just him talking, or do you think that he's actually going to go with that? And where do you see the Seattle team? Because they started out guns blazing. It was the whole let Russ cook era in the first few weeks of the season. So where are they going from here?
Yeah, I do think that Russell Wilson has a valid point when he wants to throw the football more, and he doesn't want to be in a Kirk Cousins-like offense where it's run and then play action. Those types of offenses are built to protect the quarterback. It's like, why do we think that Trey Lance could work in San Francisco? Because he has an offense that protects the quarterback. And Wilson doesn't necessarily need that to where he's only facing lighter boxes and getting one-on-ones down the field. He can make plays. I think that Pete Carroll ultimately is a defensive coach, and all defensive coaches go back that way because they know that defenses that play in shootouts all the time are stressed a lot more. And I think we see that all the time even with the Falcons in 2016, when they had the explosive offense. We saw that from even the Rams, that they didn't have the greatest defense. Then they become a lot more conservative and their defensive numbers go up quite a bit. And, talent makes a difference, play callers and all that stuff. But I think it's a kind of a trend that you very rarely see teams who are great on both ends. Because a lot of times you're scoring a lot, you're getting off the field quickly. The other teams, you're asking your defense to have a lot of plays out there. Those add up over a season. So I can see the argument for it, that the goal is to win games, not put up stats with Russell Wilson. At the same time, he's the best player you have. He's one of the 5 best players in the league. Like, you got to let him do what he's going to do, especially with DK Metcalf emerging as the superstar wide receiver. And I still have this team, despite some of its dysfunction and despite its problems, as the division winner, because last year they were a mess and they went 12-4. The Minnesota Vikings have one season that's 12-4 or better since Brett Favre played quarterback here. It's like, that was your dysfunctional season. So now you've changed some of your philosophy a bit. And I think that they're the steadiest option, where San Francisco for the quarterback position, the Rams with adding Matt Stafford, who I don't really believe in, Cliff Kingsbury, I don't really believe in. Like, I think that Russ just he gives them a floor that means if these other teams falter even a little, he's going to have them at the top of the division.
That was literally my entire argument the other night too, was just Russ is the best quarterback in the division, and quarterbacks in this league win football games when you're not supposed to win them a lot of times. And I don't know if anybody else in the division has a quarterback that can win the games that you're not supposed to. And those are the things that get you into the playoffs. That that when you're kicking and dragging and it's the dog days towards the end of the year and you need to throw and you need to make a play and you touchdown late, it's the quarterback that's going to get you over the hump. So I'm right there with you with Seattle. I do like them. I think it's going to be close. It is going to be. I could see two teams, even maybe 3 teams out of this division making the playoffs. But Caleb, what do you got? Who's winning this division?
I'm going to go with the 49ers to win the division. With Seattle, I think I know Pete Carroll just signed an extension, but I think if they falter this year, he's going to be on the hot seat for sure. You can't have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf getting passes thrown to them from Russell Wilson and come out every day and say, run the football. And I'm a proponent. I mean, you guys listen to our podcast. I think the Chiefs should run the football a little bit more than they do sometimes. But when you have that kind of talent in your receiving core and you have Russell Wilson at quarterback, you can't be talking like our strategy is going to be come out and run the ball and try to set these things up. You got to come up with an actual plan. And I just feel like their tensions are getting really high in Seattle. I think if they falter this season, then either Russ might want out or they're going to have to get a new coach in there for Pete Carroll, because I don't know. I've just kind of had this feeling for a while. It's not going to end pretty between those two, even though I do still think they'll probably win about like around 11 or 12 games this season. But I think the 49ers, I think they'll probably win around like 13 or 14. That's just what I was thinking about it.
It's interesting to me that neither one of you have the Rams as the team. And I guess maybe you're similarly skeptical as me, because having watched Matt Stafford up close year after year, it's always, well, it's the Lions organization. It's the Lions organization. And we just hear that for his entire career. But then when you see him lose games up close, you see bad timed interceptions, a sack rate that's even higher than Kirk Cousins, is one of the highest among starting quarterbacks in the league, and a guy who's constantly injured and is already injured in camp. And his toughness is laudable, but he's always hurt. And so if we're going with, well, Russell Wilson has much more better chance as a guy who constantly protects himself to play 17 games, where Stafford is probably going to be dragging down to the end with broken ribs, broken foot, broken thumb. Like, I think I'm just going to lean toward the quarterbacks that I believe can be a little more healthy.
Yeah, and I do like Stafford. I like him for fantasy this year. I think they're going to be able to throw the ball. I think he might be helped in McVay's offense with the play action run stuff. But again, I'm a Russell Wilson guy, and I think that just makes the most sense at this point. And then I'd probably choose the 49ers next if I had to. But like I said, I could see 2 or 3 teams come from this division going to the playoffs. And then I want to ask you just real quick, because I'm kind of in the same boat, is Cliff Kingsbury really hasn't been the guy that everybody kind of thought he was going to be coming into the NFL as some offensive guru. This offense has looked pretty simple, to be honest. Like, it looks like an air raid offense trying to play in the NFL, which air raid offenses work, but you need to be able to doctor it up to a point like the Kansas City Chiefs did, where you're running a ton of pre-snap motions. You're running still play action stuff, different personnels. You got screen games coming off of it. It just doesn't seem the Cardinals are doing that. There's no creativity.
Well, when DeAndre Hopkins lines up in the same spot every single play, like,
right?
What is going on? Like, no receiver does that anymore. Right. Even if you're a pure outside receiver, you have different splits, or you move inside every once in a while, or you're on different sides, but they just line them up on the same side. And that I thought was pretty big red flag. The other thing is too, we saw this from Joe Brady last year. Joe Brady's offense starts out pretty hot, and everyone goes, "Oh, wow, Joe Brady, the college guy, look, he's got this and that." But what often happens to these college offenses is that defenses study them, they adjust, they create new rules during that week to factor for what they're doing, and they've pretty much got down what you're going to do when you get there if you don't change it. And what I think the best offensive coordinators do is they start out with their base stuff and whatever they've put in throughout training camp, whatever tweaks. And we see offenses every year. Oh, this offense, it's on the pace for the best scoring of all time, right? And the reason it slows down a little bit as the season goes long is that there's small adaptations that are even hard for any of us to spot who watch the tape. Like how you adjust a route based on a coverage might change for a concept in week 7 because you know how the other team plays. And so if you say, my offense works, so we're going to run my offense, you're going to lose in the NFL. I thought Pat Shurmur was good with this when he was here and I covered him. I think Gary Kubiak for his whole career was good at it. I thought Kevin Stefanski was brilliant at it, at making just these small changes that you have to make on a week-to-week basis. If Cliff Kingsbury doesn't figure that out and sort of has a little too much hubris about his offense, that team's going to win 7 games because they play in such a difficult division that everybody else there, McVay, he's doing it. Shanahan, he's doing it. And that Wilson's going to make plays. So it's like, it's pretty hard to keep up if you're behind the times. And that would be my concern for Cliff Kingsbury. And that's why I'm not really buying Arizona.
I think Arizona also, of all the teams we've mentioned, they lack physicality compared to the rest of those teams. I think their defense is still not where it needs to be for them to be able to compete because, Kyle Shanahan's not going to have a problem lining up and running the ball 20 times or 40 times a game on you, just going in there and just slugging it out, keeping Kyler Murray off the field, keeping DeAndre Hopkins off the field, That doesn't always work against great offenses, but you say they're so inconsistent, that would be enough to beat this Cardinals team right now. I will say this, though, we need to bring something up about the Rams real quick that neither of you guys touched on. They probably have the best non-quarterback football player in the entire world on their roster right now, who did go into Seattle and beat them in a playoff game, Aaron Donald and that Rams defense. I think we should talk about them just for a second because I think the Rams, they're going to win 12 to 13 games. I think they'll probably be there like right there with Seattle for that wild card spot. But when you look at those teams, man, Seattle's interior offensive line struggles. Arizona's offensive line still isn't very good. The 49ers have a little bit better, but I do think that probably the Rams are still going to have a top-notch defense. And I think that's going to help them, even if, like losing Cam Akers is going to hurt what they can do offensively. And even if Matthew Stafford isn't all he's hyped up to be.
So I kind of think about 2018 Vikings, where they were coming off the number one defense. And even though the next year they were good, it wasn't quite the same. You lost a couple of players, a couple guys got old, a couple guys got banged up. And I think with the Rams that they will have a very good defense, but they lost like John Johnson, Troy Hill, like guys who aren't household names at all. But now you're asking for new players to plug in. You're asking for a new defensive coordinator to plug in. So I think that they'll be very good because of Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. I'm not sure I'm buying them as like the number one defense in the NFL.
I think that if you have not heard of John Johnson, go read some reports right now coming out of Cleveland. Like he's as good as there is in the league at the safety position. He's super, super underrated. So I'm a big fan of him. But yeah, Aaron Donald, there's not much you can say. He might be the greatest defensive player the NFL has ever seen. The way that he can dominate a game from the D-line position, it's just unheard of. So I'm there with you that he's a game wrecker. He's fun to watch for sure. Let's talk about this last division. We'll save the best for last, I guess. Allegedly, apparently, out of last year, the Bucs coming off their Super Bowl win. Tom Brady does it again, but they have a loaded roster. Like they're top to bottom. There's a reason that they were in the Super Bowl. They have one of the best rosters in the NFL. There is absolutely no reason that they shouldn't repeat as this division winners.
Oh, especially considering look at the rest of the teams. I mean, I'm very impressed overall with what Arthur Smith was able to do in Tennessee.
Yes.
But I'm not buying the talent for Atlanta. They lose Julio Jones. I think their offense could still be good, but their defense, like, show me where it's supposed to be way better than where it was. So they seem to me like a 500 team if they just kind of get together from where they were. Carolina, I think, could be awful. They could be drafting way up at the top again. New Orleans, I think, could actually be really bad looking at their quarterback position. Anytime you're playing a quarterback that the last time he started, he threw 30 interceptions, I'm not going to buy you, even if you have a decent roster. Plus, it doesn't look like Michael Thomas is playing anytime soon. Tampa Bay could win, 15? I mean, if Tom Brady and all of his facial surgeries hold up and don't fall apart eventually with age, then – yeah, hey, you and I could both use that. We both have big cheeks, Justin. We need a little bit of that Tom Brady just sucking us back like that, right?
It's not that we're ugly. We're just poor. If you have enough, you can look good too.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's not the avocado ice cream, man. That's for sure. Not that I'm ever going to try it. But I think that Tampa Bay is so rare that usually when you win a Super Bowl, and Kansas City was like this to some extent too, but usually you win a Super Bowl, it's like this guy gets paid, that guy gets paid, they leave, they sign over here, and then the team takes a dip down. In this case, they brought back everybody. I mean, that roster, like you said, it's a Super Bowl roster. You could truly say that. It all rests on the shoulders and the surgically repaired face of Tom Brady, and whether he can just continue to beat age and Mother Nature somehow, because if he has the Peyton Manning thing where his arm falls off, they could still win like 13 games. But if he's really good like he was last year, I mean, it's going to be them in Green Bay again in the NFC Championship, more likely than not.
And Tampa Bay just has a great offensive line. They absolutely just hammered home being able to protect him. They're solid across the board. Late in the game in that Super Bowl, they were doing whatever they wanted to do. The Chiefs, they were running the ball. Brady was pretty much untouched outside of the first quarter. Wirfs and Jensen and Marpet. It's a super talented unit. They've done a great job investing in it. All those weapons. I mean, you can't really take another team out of the South right now. I don't think you could say a team could go in there and beat them at this point out of the South.
And there's 2 out of the 4 teams in the South where you go, I just don't know what you guys are doing. Like, as an entire franchise, you're trading for Sam Darnold, which is fine if you're giving up like a 5th round pick for someone who's been a complete bust. Instead, you're repeating the Rick Meyer thing where you decide, no, we can fix him. Like, no, Matt Rule, probably not. And then, their defense isn't a whole crazy lot better. Drafting a first-round corner instead of Justin Fields is a bizarre decision. First-round corners are still not a guarantee to immediately upgrade your defense. But I think they're just going to be really, really putrid unless Sam Darnold, again, does the Josh Allen thing. But the Josh Allen thing is pretty much an all-time outlier of someone who struggled for several years and then it's like what, Steve Young and Josh Allen are the only guys who have ever really done that. So I just have a tough time buying them. And then New Orleans, they completely messed with their salary cap. They did all these different things to keep certain players. They had to let go a bunch of guys, and they're acting like they're still going to win instead of taking a more rebuild type of avenue. And I just don't get it. You're just in the perfect place to kind of take a step back, to take a step forward eventually. And they didn't really do that. That also reminds me of the Vikings from last year, where it's couldn't be us. We couldn't be the bad team. No, actually it can happen to just about anybody.
Yeah.
And if you're running Jameis Winston, there's a pretty good chance it's happening to you.
Well, the fact that they're even considering Taysom Hill as a starter just tells me really what you have to know about that roster. And like you said, Mike Thomas, who knows he seems super disgruntled. He wants out with the trade. They need a second quarterback. Their offensive line is good. They have Alvin Kamara, but even their second wide receiver, Traquan Smith, hasn't practiced. They're void of any talent on the outside right now, and it is tough to win in this league if you don't have guys that can make plays on the outside. It doesn't matter how good you are up front, and if you can run the ball, and how good of a play caller you are. Like Sean Payton, we know he's a great play caller, but you don't have Drew Brees anymore. Drew Brees couldn't throw the ball maybe 20 yards, but he was so efficient and so accurate and was able to run that offense so efficiently off of the play action, off of that run game, that it really was able to work. Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston are not those guys. They are not those guys. So I'm right there with you. It's the Bucs by a pretty clear margin in my eyes. And I know, Matt, you said you're thinking Tampa Bay, Green Bay for the NFC Championship. Who do you got?
Sorry, I was going to say I probably just ruined the end of your show by saying that loudly.
Super Bowl, who's winning that game?
I think Tampa Bay. But, look, if Brady does fall off, then we're talking about a whole different story. And they were losing to New Orleans last year until Jared Cook did them a huge favor. So it's not a guarantee that Tampa Bay goes back, but that roster, man, it's just so strong. And you're still talking about the best quarterback of all time. A friend of mine, former NFL player, said, I'll bet against Tom Brady when he is on TV. That's when I will bet on him, is that when he's in the booth or something, not as long as he has a uniform. So I think I'm going to go the same direction that Aaron gets disappointed again in the NFC Championship game. But Caleb, I'll give you credit for the 49ers. I think they're also a very, very strong pick. So maybe it's not Green Bay. Maybe their roster isn't as strong. How about I do that then? I'll go Tampa Bay and San Francisco, with Tampa Bay winning that game and going to the Super Bowl.
I like that. I was just thinking, yeah.
That's what you got too, Caleb. Well, I'm gonna go with the Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and I'm gonna take the Packers. I'm gonna say that they learned from last year. They're not gonna kick the field goal. They're actually gonna let their all-world quarterback make a freaking play in the fourth quarter and give them a chance to win and go to the Super Bowl. So I'm gonna say that, and I'm gonna take the Chiefs. I'm going Packers Chiefs for my Super Bowl pick. I'm gonna make you pick who's coming out of the AFC, Matt, before we get out of here. So who do you got in the Super Bowl?
See, how can I go a different direction than the Chiefs, since I'm here with all Chiefs friends? How about this? I think everybody would pick the Chiefs, right? So what team could do it that is not the Chiefs? And I think that, as improbable as it would seem, Cleveland would be the team to pick if it's not the Chiefs. That Cleveland was on the doorstep there until Chad Henne turned into Michael Vick for a second. But they were there. And I think they've gotten even better on the defensive side. So how about a Cleveland Browns, Tampa Bay Bucs Super Bowl, just like you drew it up?
Can you imagine? No, and I agree, though. I think the Browns have done a tremendous job building that roster, and they improved it again this offseason. And they're saying, you know what, if we want to compete in the AFC, we got to play this guy Mahomes. Let's keep building up this defense, getting pass rushers, putting some guys in the secondary. So I think that's it's not going to be them. It's going to be the Chiefs, but I respect I respect it if it does go in some other direction to be there. But Matt, you're the man. We appreciate you coming on and talking with us. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and what you're working on?
Sure. Purpleinsider.substack.com is where I do all of my writing, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. If you're interested in Vikings content, you can sign up for free or become a subscriber. Free people get still a lot of our feature stuff. And the Purple Insider podcast, where whenever you get your podcast, just type in Purple Insider. And now even Purple Insider Extra is on YouTube. So look, we're everywhere, man.
I love it. No, it's been great. We really appreciate you being here. We appreciate everybody stopping in and watching this. Make sure on your way out, you're smashing that like button. You're hitting the subscribe. Go over to the Purple Insider. Make sure you're subscribing there, getting the newsletter. I got the newsletter. It's fantastic read every single day that you get. I always look forward to it. So, Matt, you're crushing it out there in Minnesota. Make sure you wear the sunscreen or tell Zimmer to get you some shade, buddy.
Free NFL Game Pass.
Yeah. Work on NFL Game Pass for us, too. Get that back.
Guys, you are testing the limits of my power by doing that. I can't help you there. I can't even get myself some shade. So I'm not going to be able to get all 22 back for you.
Right. Exactly. But all right. We appreciate everybody being here. We'll talk to you next time.